Chapter 18. Looking for Larissa. It was a nurse who took Larissa away from me, and it was the doctor at the work camp who killed children for their blood. When the Americans took me to their hospital, I couldn't stop screaming. They took away my blue flannel dress. I was shepherded into a lineup, naked and shivering, for a shower I refused to go in. A nurse picked me up and carried me in, ignoring my screams and scratches, ignoring the hot water that streamed down her uniform and ruined her leather shoes. When the warm water coursed through my hair and over my face, my muscles relaxed, and I clung to that nurse as if she were my mother. Soaking wet and fully dressed, she sat me on her lap and rocked me, cooing a lullaby as she gently massaged shampoo into my hair and lovingly soaped away the months of dirt encrusted beneath my fingernails and behind my ears. I sobbed when she lathered the soap with her fingertips and gently massaged the soft suds into the wounds on my feet and legs. She washed sores I didn't even know I had on my back and on my elbows. It had been so long since someone had cared for me that I could barely stand it. The soap she used smelled like lilacs. It was nothing like that bleaching powder. She used real shampoo for my hair, and my scalp didn't sting a bit. She wrapped me in a towel, and she dried herself as well. Her nurse's cap was wilted and ruined, and her bun had come unpinned. When I was dry, she gave me back my blue flannel dress. As I pulled it over my head, I wrinkled my nose as the unmistakable chemical smell of lice killer. I longed for a future when that poison was no longer necessary. Once I was clean, I thought she would let me go to one of the camps for refugees. I wanted to go to the one with the priest and the makeshift church with the icon of the Virgin Mary. But Nurse Astrid said not yet. She brought me to a long corridor of white beds that were not made of filthy straw. Each bed held a slave laborer who had been injured in a different way. Bandages covering eyes or a leg in a cast suspended by a pulley. Some looked whole, but they stared at the ceiling without blinking. She lifted me onto an empty bed at the end of the corridor. When she held a syringe to my arm, I tried to pull away. My mind knew that Nurse Astrid was trying to heal me, but my heart remembered the terrible things that had happened to children in that hospital in the work camp. "Please trust me," she said in an American-accented Ukrainian. I took a deep breath and closed my eyes. I tried to trust her. She brought a doctor who did things to my feet and legs that hurt beyond belief. When I tried to crawl away, Astrid was the one who caught me and threatened to tie me to the bed. "Please trust me," she said again. Astrid fed me, first just spoonfuls, and as my stomach got stronger, mouthfuls. My hunger roared like a lion. I could have eaten non-stop if she'd let me. I knew that Astrid was being kind, but everything she did reminded me that I was still a prisoner. More than anything, I wanted to get away, to begin my search for Larissa, and for us to both go home. When my feet had no more open wounds, Astrid would come by with a salve and massage them. It hurt intensely when she did it, but I also knew that it was good for my feet. "Soon you'll be ready to leave," she said. One morning, after breakfast, she placed a big wrinkled paper bag beside me on my hospital bed and grinned. "Open it." Inside was a pair of thick woolen socks and a pair of sturdy leather boots that looked to be my size. My eyes filled with tears. The shoes that Julie had given me were so badly worn that they had disintegrated long ago. Clothing was scarce with all the refugees to be cared for, and footwear was even harder to come by. Yet Astrid had somehow found me these precious items. "Thank you," I said in her language. It was one of the first phrases of English that I had learned. It was early June and warm out, but the wool felt good on my feet. I laced the boots up as tightly as I dared and took a few steps. Slowly, I was beginning to feel like a human again. It struck me that Astrid looked so much like that nurse who had taken Larissa away from me, and it made me wonder, did that other nurse think she was somehow healing us with her actions? I would probably never know. Astrid got permission to take me by jeep to the displaced persons camp with the makeshift church. The distance between the hospital and the camp was not great, but it took several hours because the roads were clogged with ragged refugees. They would travel in clusters, but not all in the same direction. "They go from camp to camp looking for loved ones," said Astrid. I searched the faces as we passed them, and I looked especially carefully whenever I saw a girl with blonde hair, but I never saw anyone who could be Larissa. The refugees were a wild assortment, speaking more languages than I ever knew existed. Some pushed wheelbarrows piled high with plundered china plates. Others carried battered suitcases overflowing with yellowed family photos. Looked too healthy to be refugees. More than a few were clothed in striped rags. Gaunt beings clutched a piece of bread or a jar of pickles as if it were the finest treasure on earth. The countryside was pocked with ragged craters where bombs had landed, and it was rare to see a building standing. The road itself was a maze of rubble and holes, and I knew that unexploded landmines littered the ground. But Astrid maneuvered the jeep like an expert. "Here we are," she said, pulling up to the one standing section of an ancient stone wall. Hundreds of bits of paper fluttered from it, their corners shoved into the crevices and cracks to secure them. This used to be a convent. The sight of those hundreds of papers made me panic. By the time my father had been taken by the Soviets, praying was against the law. I had watched my mother fold up a note in the middle of the night and walk in the cover of darkness to our little blue church. It had been locked, and the priest executed. So what was she doing there? The next day I had crept to the church when no one was looking. I found her note tucked into a crack in the church wall. I pulled it out and read her plea to God to bring my father home. Then I took the note and placed it on my tongue, swallowing it like a sacrament. I wanted my father home too, but didn't my mother realize she risked all our lives by writing that note? I never told her what I had done. Astrid took my hand, and together we walked over to those fluttering bits of prayers. I reached up and held one flat so I could read it. Anya Zuk from Drobich. Looking for Ivan. Left for Flensburg, June 2nd, 1945. I looked at another and another. All were details of refugees searching for their loved ones. "Will they get into trouble for making these notes?" I asked. Astrid shook her head. "Who is it you're looking for, Lita? I'll help you go through these." I told her about Larissa, but also about Luca and Xenia, Katerina, and Natalia. My heart ached as I read the details of so many lost loved ones, but I kept my hopes until the very last paper. When we were finally done, I had found no one I loved. I wanted to curl up and weep. But Astrid told me that she would send my name and the names of my dear ones to the Red Cross. It may take time, she said, but we will find someone you know. With her arms draped lightly across my shoulder, she led me inside the refugee camp.